She had just escaped one man's hell, only to collapse at the feet of another man running from his own. Her first words to him would decide both their fates. But before that moment, before the desert and the stranger, there was the cellar, there was the fire, and there was the sound that started it all. She could taste blood before she could see it. Metal and dust filled her mouth, a gritty paste of despair. A rough hand shoved her face into the damp earth floor. Another voice, thick with whiskey and amusement, laughed somewhere behind her. For 3 years, Ada had lived in the dark. 3 years since her husband, a man whose love had curdled into a possessive poison, had locked her away to teach her, as he called it, obedience. She had stopped begging weeks into the first year. Begging only made him smile. Silence, she had learned, was safer than mercy. It was the only armor she had left. Tonight, though, the world above had cracked open. His heavy boots thundered down the wooden stairs, each step a hammer blow against her heart. He held a bottle in one hand, a coiled leather belt in the other. "Still think you can run from me, little bird?" he hissed, his shadow dancing grotesquely on the damp stone walls. Ada didn't answer. She pressed herself further into the corner, making herself small. Her eyes, long accustomed to the gloom, darted around, searching for anything. And then she saw it. Tucked away on a dusty crate, almost hidden, was a small, intricately carved wooden music box. He had given it to her on their wedding day, a lifetime ago. She remembered the man he had been then, or the man she thought he had been, charming, attentive, with a smile that reached his eyes. The box played a simple, haunting melody, their song. Now it sat there like a tombstone for the love that had died, for the woman she used to be. The memory was a shard of glass in her soul, a reminder of how far they had fallen. He lunged for her, his breath hot and foul. As he reached for her again, she moved. Not with the sluggishness of a victim, but with the explosive, final energy of a cornered animal. Her hand closed around the rusted pair of scissors she had seen earlier near the crate, the ones he used for cutting twine. One sound, a strangled gasp, then nothing. He fell without a word, his dead weight crushing the oil lantern on the floor. Flame kissed the dry straw. In seconds, the room screamed with fire. Smoke clawed at her throat. Adrenaline surged through her, overriding the pain, the years of terror. Ada stumbled through the smoke, barefoot and wild-eyed, the heat licking at her heels. Behind her, the house, her prison, began to die, its groans the final death rattle of her old life. Every step up the stairs was agony, every breath a punishment of smoke and ash. But she didn't stop. The desert night met her like a cold, brutal slap. The wind howled across the endless, moonlit sand, a symphony of desolation. She ran. She ran until her legs forgot what running meant, until her lungs felt like they were filled with shattered glass. Hours blurred into a meaningless stretch of survival. The blood on her hands dried, black and cracked under the moonlight. When the first hint of dawn painted the horizon in sickly shades of gray and pink, she was no longer sure if she was alive or already a ghost haunting the wasteland that had swallowed her. Her thin cotton dress, now little more than a rag, clung to her skin, torn and heavy with sweat. She followed the phantom sound of a river that wasn't there, her mind a flickering candle in the wind. Then, through the shimmering heat haze, she saw it, a shape, a cabin, a man. For a long, dizzying moment, she thought it was another hallucination, another cruel trick of a dying mind. But the shape remained. She dragged herself closer, one agonizing step at a time, until her knees finally gave out beside a large, flat stone at the edge of his property. The small sound of her collapse, a soft thud, and a rustle of dry grass, was enough. The man turned. He was tall, graying at the temples, with eyes as sharp and unforgiving as winter steel. Gideon had spent half his life and all of his soul running from what he used to be. He had built this cabin with his own 2 hands in the heart of nowhere, cultivating a fortress of silence to keep his demons at bay. When he saw the woman collapse, his hand moved instinctively, a motion as natural as breathing, toward the rifle leaning by his door. Strangers meant trouble. Trouble meant noise. and noise was the one thing he could not abide. Then he heard her voice, a broken whisper carried on the wind. "Don't. Stop. Please." She was shaking, bleeding, terrified beyond reason. Gideon froze. For a long, silent second, neither of them breathed. His mind, hardened by years of cynicism and a past he fought to forget, made an instant, cold calculation. He'd seen women like this before, in dusty saloons and border towns. Runaways from brothels, their clothes torn, their stories practiced, their pleas a tool of the trade. His face, already a mask of grim neutrality, hardened further. A flicker of disgust, cold and sharp, crossed his features. He judged her in a heartbeat. She tried to crawl away, not from him, but from the specter of the man she had just left behind in the fire. The movement was clumsy, pathetic. He saw the raw, animal terror in her eyes. And then he saw something else. On her arms, visible through the tatters of her dress, were old scars, faded, silvery lines that spoke of a pain far older than this single night. This wasn't the calculated fear of a saloon girl. This was the pure, soul-deep horror of the truly broken. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He was wrong, dead wrong. In that moment of shame, another face superimposed itself over hers. The face of another young woman, years ago, Amelia Miller, the daughter of a wealthy, cruel rancher Gideon had once worked for, back when he was a different man, an enforcer, a retriever of property. Amelia had run away from a brutal arranged marriage. Gideon's job had been to find her and bring her back. He had found her, hiding and terrified, much like this woman. He had followed his orders. He had returned her to her father. A week later, he heard she had taken her own life. Her ghost had been his silent companion in the desert ever since. This woman, Ada, bleeding at his feet, was Amelia's echo. She was his second chance, a chance he knew he didn't deserve. His entire posture changed. The cold judgment in his eyes was replaced by a deep, hollow ache. He stepped back slowly, deliberately making himself smaller, less threatening. His voice, when it came out, was low and rough with disuse. "Careful, I ain't going to hurt you, ma'am." Her hands trembled harder. Tears, clean and stark, carved lines down her dirty cheeks. "I just can't be touched," she stammered, the words ripped from her. Not even by kindness. Gideon felt something twist deep inside his chest. He had seen bodies, seen blood, seen the aftermath of violence. But he had never seen a soul so utterly shattered. He knelt a few feet away, always maintaining a careful distance. "Let me help you." She shook her head, a violent, jerky motion. "You can't help what's already dead." The desert wind rose, lifting sand across the dying sunlight. He watched her struggle to stand, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps, the kind that meant the body was quitting. She whispered to herself, a mantra of the damned, "I can make it stop. I just need somewhere quiet." Quiet. That word hit him harder than any bullet ever had. He had come to this desert for that very reason. To disappear, to forget, to live in a silence so profound it might finally drown out the screams of his past. And now, silence had found him again, bleeding on his doorstep. Gideon looked toward the horizon. No riders yet, but the tracks she'd left behind were a clear trail for anyone who came looking. He had two choices. Let her die and keep his precious, empty peace, or open his door and invite the war inside. Her eyes met his, pale green, hopeless, but still flickering with the stubborn spark of life. He let out a long, slow breath, a sigh of resignation. He stepped back and nodded toward the cabin. "Doors open. Come in when you're ready." She looked at him, then at the ground, then back at him, her mind struggling to process the simple offer. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. Instead, she began to crawl forward, slow and shaking, into the deep shadow of his home. Gideon closed the door behind her, the sound of the latch clicking into place echoing like a promise neither of them understood yet. Outside, the wind died. The desert went still, and somewhere far off, a single coyote began to howl, a lonely cry in the vast, gathering darkness. What was he really letting in that night? A dying woman, or the past he swore he had buried? The cabin smelled of wood smoke, old leather, and solitude. Gideon set a pot of water on the stove, deliberately keeping his eyes off the woman. Ada had collapsed near the door, too weak to move, staring at the floorboards as if they were the only solid thing left in the universe. When he approached with a thick wool blanket, she flinched so violently he stopped in his tracks. He understood. He laid the blanket down on the floor a few feet away from her. "For the cold," he said softly, "you don't have to take it." He watched her hands tremble for a full minute before she finally reached for it, pulling it around her shaking shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered. Two small, fragile words. He just nodded and retreated to his chair by the window, resuming his silent vigil. He slid a cup of water across the table toward her. She didn't drink. She just stared at the steam rising from it, as if it reminded her of a life she could no longer access. After a silence that stretched for what felt like an hour, her voice came out rough and broken. "Do you believe in hell?"
Thank you.
He looked up from the darkness outside. "I've been there a few times." That drew a ghost of a smile from her, the first sign of life beyond pure terror. "I didn't mean the kind in the Bible," she said. "I meant the kind a man builds for you. One lock at a time." Elias said nothing. He simply listened. She pulled the blanket tighter.
If
"I killed him. My husband. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did." Her eyes glistened in the firelight. "He kept me in the cellar for 3 years. Said he was teaching me obedience. Every night, he made me forget who I was." She paused, a tremor running through her. "I stopped begging after the first year. Begging made him laugh. So I prayed instead.
I killed him.
But then, I think God stopped answering, too."
I killed him.
Gideon stared into the fire.
husband.
He didn't offer empty comforts. He didn't say it was fine. He didn't say she was forgiven. He just gave her the one thing no one else had, the space for her story to exist. "That last night," she continued, her voice barely audible, "he told me I wasn't even worth hitting anymore. I remember seeing that old pair of scissors. I don't remember much after that. Only fire, and then the sound of nothing." She took a slow, shuddering breath, as if the story itself was a poison leaving her body. "Guess I'm not welcome anywhere now. Not in this world or the next." Gideon stood,
He was on the
walked to a
ground.
small shelf, and grabbed a tin of whiskey.
Come in here.
He poured a small measure into her cup of water. "Drink. It'll help the shaking." She hesitated, then did as he said. The burn in her throat made her cough, a raw, hacking sound, but she didn't stop. Gideon finally
not welcome
spoke,
anywhere
his
now.
voice low and certain.
Not in this
"You did what you
world
had to do to survive.
next."
That don't make you evil." She looked at him then, truly looked at him,
Shaking.
with an expression of such profound, desperate longing to believe him that it nearly broke his heart. Outside, the wind picked up again, a low moan against the cabin walls. Ada's eyes started to close. She fought it,
Did what you had to do
whispering,
to
"If his
survive."
brothers find me, they'll kill me."
That don't make you evil.
Gideon met her gaze, his own eyes calm but sharp as honed steel. "Then we best make sure they don't." Her lips parted, fear flickering again. "You mean, they're already close?" He didn't answer. He just looked out the window, his jaw tight, his eyes narrowing into the vast, unforgiving dark. Because out there,
brothers find
something
me,
was
they'll kill
moving.
me.
The night grew colder, heavier. Elias hadn't moved from the window. The lamp burned low,
Best make sure
painting lines of hardship across his face. He could see it clearly now, dust rising on the horizon,
they're already
illuminated by the moon. 3 riders, moving slow and steady, not the kind that were just passing by, the kind that were hunting. He turned to Ada. She was finally asleep, the blanket pulled up to her chin, her face calm for the first time. He thought about waking her, about the terror that would return to her eyes. He decided against it. Instead, he reached for his rifle. The sound of the metal bolt sliding back was soft but final. It was the sound of a line being drawn in the sand. Minutes later, hooves crunched on the dirt outside. A rough voice called out, "Gideon, we know she's in there. Hand over the murdering whore, and we'll be on our way." Gideon opened the door slowly, his hand resting easy on his belt. The 3 men outside looked like every kind of trouble he used to run with. 3 horses, 3 guns, 3 pairs of dead eyes. He spoke, his voice calm. You boys rode a long way for a lie. The one in front, a big man with a cruel grin, spat on the ground. Word is the girl killed her husband. We're just here to see justice done. Gideon tilted his head. I've seen what you call justice. Didn't look much like it to me. The man's grin faded. You're hiding her, Gideon. Gideon shrugged. Maybe, or maybe I'm just tired of men who think they own other people's souls. The man's hand drifted toward his gun. Then you're standing in our way. Gideon's voice dropped, as low and resonant as thunder before a storm. Son, I've been in the way my whole life. No one saw who drew first. 3 shots cracked through the silence like whip strikes. When the smoke cleared, only the wind was left moving. Gideon stood there, still as stone, his chest rising and falling slowly. He turned back toward the cabin. Ada stood in the doorway, her eyes wide, hands pressed to her mouth. You killed them. He gave a slow nod. Yeah, guess old habits die harder than I thought. Tears filled her eyes, but this time, they were not tears of fear. She walked closer, stopping a few feet away. They would have taken me back. Gideon looked at the horizon again, as if to make sure it was empty. No one's taking you anywhere now. The words hung heavy, but gentle in the cold air. She swallowed hard. Why are you helping me? He finally met her gaze, and in his eyes, she saw the ghost of Amelia Miller. Because someone should have a long time ago. Silence filled the cabin again, but this time, it wasn't empty. It felt like the first clean breath after years spent underwater. Outside, the sky was turning from black to silver. Morning was coming, and for the first time in years, Gideon didn't feel the urge to run. Weeks turned into a quiet routine of healing. But healing is not a straight line. One afternoon, a summer storm rolled in, dark and violent. The sky turned black, and the first crack of thunder sounded not like thunder, but like the heavy tread of boots on the cellar stairs. Ada cried out, a raw, terrified sound. She scrambled into the corner of the cabin, pulling the blanket over her head, her body shaking uncontrollably. The past had her again. Gideon saw it happen. His first instinct was to go to her, to comfort her, but he stopped. He remembered her words, I can't be touched. Instead, he sat down across the room, took a small block of cedar wood from his pocket, and drew his knife. He began to whittle. He didn't look at her. He just carved, the blade making a soft, rhythmic shack sound against the wood. It was a gentle, predictable sound, a sound of creation, not destruction, a sound of peace. Slowly, painstakingly, the rhythmic whisper of the knife cut through the roar of the storm in her mind. Her shaking subsided. After the storm passed, she looked up, her eyes red, and saw the small, perfectly carved bird he had left on the table for her. He hung his cold peacemaker under a small wooden cross he had carved long ago, and left it there. The lavender she had hung by his bed filled the small cabin, a soft, clean scent like a new beginning. They didn't need to speak of the fire, or the cellar, or the men buried behind the hill. Every sunrise they chose to wake up in that cabin together was a kind of forgiveness. Silence had become their language. Kindness, their way of speaking. Years later, folks in the nearby towns would whisper stories about a quiet ranch where a woman with gentle eyes lived with an old cowboy who never carried a gun anymore. They said no one really knew what brought them together, but anyone who ever stopped there for water left with a full stomach and a strange sense that maybe, just maybe, second chances were real. Elias once told her, his voice quiet as he watched the sunset, we don't get to choose what breaks us, Ada, but we sure as hell get to choose what we build from the pieces. She smiled at him that day, her eyes bright, her voice steady. And what did we build, Gideon? He looked out toward the horizon, no longer seeing ghosts, but endless possibility. Something worth staying for. The wind moved through the tall grass, slow and quiet. And just like that, the desert finally rested.